How are you?
Lev, I'm doing very well. Thanks for doing this with me.
Thanks for doing this with me as well. What was yesterday like for you and the week in general? What were you up to?
Well, my mom's visiting LA. She's here on a conference for the Women's Presidents Organization. So, Claire and I, my girlfriend, we were catching up with her. Otherwise, I've just been reading some articles and preparing for this podcast right here.
So you've made
Ha-
one episode so far of the podcast, and I listened to it, enjoyed it very much. What do you hope to accomplish with the podcast? What would you say is your goal?
Well, after listening to my first podcast, one of my goals is to use less filler words. Apparently, I said right, and you know what I mean? A little too much. So I'm going to try to polish my speech.
I know what you mean, and I have this habit of every time somebody says a certain sentence, in order to validate what they're saying, I also end up saying like, "You are correct, good point." Sometimes I don't think I should say anything. Sometimes I think a little bit of dead air is not a bad thing until I get to the other side of the argument. What do you think?
I think you're right. How's your week been? What have you been up to?
Yesterday, I went to a hot yoga class, a hot athletic yoga class. It was very intense. It was intense because I wasn't exactly ready for this thing. Because before the yoga class, since I underestimated it, I did a warm up exercise. You know, the one where you have your hands and feet on the floor, and then you do kind of like up like this, up like that, with your hands and the foot in the air. So I did that a couple of times. I did the feet swinging around like 50 times on each foot. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Where you take your foot kind of like you do these motions. So
Like
after that,
mountain
I did the
climbers?
what?
Or like mountain climbers? It sounds like you started in downward dog and then started doing like leg lifts or leg
Yes, exactly. I did some
exercises.
downward dogs. I did some leg lifts, but later on, I ended up going graduating into the bigger muscular workouts. As you can see, I'm a very muscular guy, so
I
I
know
ended
you and
up
me
doing.
both. We look like we're full of
No,
soy right now.
you are like an Adonis compared to
No,
me.
I've
Don't
lost.
even don't even start.
I have
I'm
to
like Jack
get back in the
Skellington.
gym. I
I'm
have to
like
get
Jack
back in the
Skellington.
gym.
I was the model for him. Tim Burton saw me and was like, I have an idea for my next movie
No,
right
no.
after right after Beetlejuice. So I ended up going to the weight rack, picking up two. What was it? I think it was 55-pound dumbbells and lifting those guys a couple of times in the bench press. So that was good. I could still feel it in the pecs. I never really have a problem with those bench presses. That's actually easy. But after all this time, I went to do that hot athletic yoga, and I was not prepared for that at all. That was just it was a great mistake to do all of that stuff because I was already wiped out, and they had us doing burpees. They had us doing actually the similar motion that I was doing in the very beginning of the warm up, where you would do a plank and then you would take your foot and try to bring it to the opposite hand. So we did those for a minute, then we did burpees, then we did another really horrible thing, and we just kept doing that for 3 rounds. And at the end of it, I was ready. I was ready to go. I was ready to pass on to the other realm. But the good thing about that is that when we were lying down, you just felt that feeling that I think a lot of people are missing nowadays. Where, I mean, unless you do work hard on a regular basis, I don't know if the folks who went into that class were as unprepared for the strain as I was in terms of the high level of yoga that you have to do there. Like some people were even doing handstands at certain times. They were
It
just
was
doing that like clockwork.
it was Kundalini or Bikram.
It was sort of like Bikram, although Bikram doesn't like other people using the word Bikram to describe things that are like Bikram.
It's trademarked now,
Yes,
isn't it? It's
exactly.
trademarked.
Yeah, so they
Right.
just call it hot
Well, they
athletic.
have it's 13 poses. It's hard. Bikram is like 13 poses or
Oh,
something.
I wouldn't know. I'd never looked into
I'm a
exactly.
vinyasa. I've always been a vinyasa guy, but ever since you were talking about Kundalini, or is it Kundalini? I've been really interested to try it. I haven't gotten around to it, but it's more focused on the breathing, right?
Well, Kundalini is something that I've technically been doing every day ever since I went to. Well, technically, I'd say Wim Hof. The Wim Hof method is also a type of Kundalini yoga. They all end up doing the same thing, and in fact,
Could you say who that
pranayama.
is? Could you
Yeah,
say who is
sure,
Tim Hoff?
absolutely. That's another thing, by the way, that I'm gonna have to work on in doing these things.
Well,
Whenever I talk
we have
about
each
things,
other.
I assume that everybody knows them. And no, not everybody knows them. So Wim Hof is this Dutch guy who invented a breathing technique after, unfortunately, his wife ended up passing away, and he went into nature. He went into the cold in order to get in touch with his inner self. And as a result, he ended up finding a way to withstand really cold temperatures by doing a breathing technique that starts diluting the blood vessels and starts secreting a lot of heat in the body, and it also starts secreting DMT.
So
And
that's
DMT,
he's the ice man,
he is the
right? He's the
Iceman.
guy that went to Mount Everest in like
Yes,
his shorts.
yes, just his shorts. They also put him in a bucket full of ice, and they measured his core body temperature, and the core body temperature remained completely normal. So
Yeah.
what this means
Wow.
is it's not a matter of him being some superhuman. Like, as far as physicality goes, he's a regular looking guy. Like, he's not a Hercules or anything of that sort. And as far as the technique goes, the thing that ends up attracting it to me is that it's able to secrete the psychedelic chemical, DMT. I'm pretty sure that's what it's doing. Like, I can't say 100% sure that that's what's going on, but I'm pretty sure that that's what's going
Let
on.
me slow down. So what you're saying is his breathing technique helps produce DMT.
Yes, it helps produce how do I say this correctly?
Methyl
Dimethyl
dimethyltryptamine.
dimethyltryptamine, exactly. And it's a chemical that's supposedly produced in the lungs, so it makes
Huh.
sense that by doing a breathing technique, you would start secreting more of that
Hmm.
stuff. And it's also supposedly produced by the pineal gland as well, where in its original state, it's in the state of being, I think, one molecule short of DMT. And
Hmm.
that state of being is, what do you call it? Is melatonin. So melatonin and DMT are just one molecule difference.
No kidding. Huh. Melatonin, that's the hormone that your dreams operate on, right? Because you can take melatonin over the counter. As like I take it
I
as a
don't know about
sleep.
dreams particularly, but they regulate your sleep cycle.
I
So, for
heard
example, if you get a melatonin supplement, you can use it to reset your internal clock. And in fact, that's something that I've been doing recently. If, for example, there's a day where I have to go and stay somewhere for a long amount of time, and then go back home, and it's already 12 o'clock, I can't do anything about that day. The next day, I'm gonna have to wake up late because it's good to get 8 hours of sleep if you can. But in that next day, I would take a melatonin supplement.
right.
So I'd go to sleep at the abnormally crazy time of 10. No, what am I talking about? Not 10 p.m. No, 10 p.m. is too normal. I would go to sleep at 8 p.m. and wake up at 4 a.m.
I know this. I know this. I know this. Because I'm in LA, you're in New York, and sometimes we have these odd hour conversations where you're waking up and I'm going to bed. And yes.
Well, the important thing is we end up meeting each other halfway, like ships in the night that are crossing each other, going divergent paths. But anyway, back to the Wim Hof method that you were asking about, and Kundalini Yoga. The reason why I think that and Kundalini Yoga, and also various pranayama techniques that different people have been practicing, like Iyengar or Iyengar of Iyengar Yoga. They have some classes here in New York. He also does breathing techniques and pranayama, but he doesn't, well, he's not alive anymore, but his students don't call it Kundalini Yoga, even though the whole process is that of eventually starting the whole process of the Kundalini going up. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen for everybody, but for some people it does end up happening. But unfortunately, it's not something that you can just take as as a toy, as a, why don't I try this and don't pay any attention to what's going on in my body? Because there are reports of people who just start doing these breathing techniques, and they do them so intensely, just nonstop every day, like putting in 110%. And for some of those people, they ended up awaking something inside of them like an electric shock all at once. Afterwards, they started feeling, intense heat months at a time. They started seeing demonic entities. Like, it was horrible stuff. So there could be a premature Kundalini awakening in some people, and that's not great. Like, that's something that people have to deal with. So what I'm trying to say here is that all of these different methods, the Wim Hof method, pranayama techniques, Kundalini yoga, I'd encourage people to look into them, but to take it like one step at a time, like not rush, because this is, you're not just dealing with, it's probably more dangerous than
it sounds like people who go to the gym and don't practice good form. They'll try to throw on too much weight, and their form will suffer, and they're more likely to get an injury. So you have to scale yourself, right? And you have to know your body, and you have to know your limits. And that's the thing. The older you get, you're less, it's harder for you to bounce back, right? From certain stressors or certain injury. When you're a teenager, when you're a little kid, you can kind of jump into things extremely intensely, and your body's going to adjust. But the older you get, if you don't temper your intensity, it can backfire, which is why I imagine you're suggesting to be mindful about that. Did you see Wild Wild Country on Netflix yet? The documentary?
No, I did not. What's that about?
It is so amazing. It was a 6-part series on Netflix about the Rajneeshi cult. Are you familiar? The Rajneeshis? Let me look
Hold on, you're getting a little cut off. Say that again.
Rajneeshi.
Rajneeshi.
Right?
Let me take
Rajneeshis.
Rajneeshi. Dead air. I don't care. Okay, I wanted to go to images, but okay, here we go. Images.
Yeah, they would wear all red.
I'm getting a bearded Indian fellow, and I'm getting a non-bearded Indian fellow.
Started in India, and then they moved to America, and they started like their own little compound, their own community, and it was a cult. And the documentary on Netflix, Wild Wild Country, is about how it started, what its intentions were, and a lot of the ways it kind of went wrong. And it had a lot to do with people were petitioning against them in the public sphere, and they're trying to strip away their rights. And it's a fascinating documentary because it's sort of like, I was kind of asking myself, like, at what point in the documentary am I supposed to stop rooting for the cult? Do you know what I mean? It was kind of weird because they're obviously, I mean, that's a joke because like they show things they did wrong. A lot of it was in pure retaliation, though. They were clearly, they started off as victims, but they became their leaders. Some of their leaders became corrupt. So while you had this group of, I think, thousands of people, they had like a leadership, and there was corruption within their leadership that was getting very insidious, right? They were basically like attempted murders and poisoning and like all sorts of crazy stuff. You have to see it. It's like,
I will see it, but when you say poisoning, this isn't like on the level of Jonestown, right? This would be more like
no.
What would you compare this to?
Like they tried to poison one member who they thought was a threat to their leader, and then they poisoned a water supply, but it wasn't successful. But they tried to poison a water supply. That's
very un-Hindu of them, if you think about it.
Yes.
Like respecting nature and all that stuff, not eating cows, and here they go poisoning a water supply.
Yeah.
They've probably angered some river demon. So I wouldn't do that even if I didn't care about the environment. You know, like if I'm in a cult, then I'm probably already in the mentality of the occult, where I understand that every single fiber of nature has a supporting intelligence behind it. Like if I am getting into that stuff in the first place, unless I'm a complete fraud. If I'm a complete fraud, then I don't care. Then I would poison wherever I have to poison. So would you say these folks were true believers, or they were putting on a show?
I think it was. So you know what? Let me pull up an article. It's been a month. I feel like it's been a month or more since I've. When did this come out? It's been so long since I saw it. I watched it the first weekend it came out, and it was a huge sensation. And cults right now are a big topic, I think, whether it's in like pop culture and like the art world, but also in the political world, right? Because you have all these like people, like all sorts of different people operate on core beliefs, right? Whether you're an atheist or you're religious or you're agnostic, but people want communities, right? They want to feel a part of something. Someone like Peter Thiel has told everyone he thinks people need to start cults, right? Peter Diamandis and others echo that.
Other Peters.
Well. What? Other
Peters.
Other Peters.
We got to find some Peters and join their cult, or have them join our cult, or have them be the puppet figure behind our cult, so that we wouldn't get in trouble. We just have to have a Peter in front of us to.
You don't need a puppet figure. Have you read Brave New World?
Sure.
Right? So we just need a bunch of surrogates, right? You just need a bunch of surrogates, right? That's the whole thing. I don't remember
the part about the surrogates. I remember the part about people taking drugs and others living on Indian reservations. But Soma, exactly. What is this about the surrogates?
So in Brave New World, the surrogates were basically like they would have families of 80 people, right? And they would have their orgies, and they were all like family units were a lot different in Brave New World. It wasn't the nuclear family model. So Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel. It's kind of like 1984, George Orwell's 1984, but it's all about social control and genetic engineering and like sexual taboos and that kind of stuff. So the surrogates were like a cross between family members and siblings, but they were all like, I think a lot of them were actually like clones of each other. And so it was just, it's just a whole mishmash. But
this reminds me of this illustration of Dr. Eggman from Sonic the Hedgehog, otherwise known as Dr. Robotnik, where he's looking at a duplicate drawing of himself, and he's saying, "My very own clone. Now neither of us will be virgins."
No. Yes. Right. Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. He's got the
Brave New World for Dr. Eggman. He figured that he's tired of fighting Sonic and getting all the Chaos Emeralds. He might as well settle down with a person who's just as smart as he is.
Right. He's like, why am I wasting my time doing all this aggravating stuff when I could just, be creating my own little family of clones? Or
this actually takes us back to the problem in Brave New World, where you've got this constant surge of distraction and soma and pleasure and sex. And even though it's like good stuff, it's kind of like in the Twilight Zone, where there was a episode about this degenerate gambler who died, and he thought he was in heaven at first because the dude led him to the dude who was kind of like his his guide, led him into this room where he could have everything he ever wanted. He had all these hot girls around him. He can gamble, and all the time he won. But eventually he got tired because, like, what's the point of gambling if I'm going to win every single time? There is no point. So there is not as much of a point to having a 69 with your own clone if eventually you keep going on and going on and going on, and eventually you get tired of it. You know, like, any kind of pleasure, the most pleasurable thing you could think of, will eventually become pain, will eventually become complete deterioration of the soul, because there's nothing else for you to aim. So the problem there is that all these folks had nothing to aim for. They were just constantly regurgitating the same pleasurable thing. So in a way, they became kind of like animals, just following certain pre-calculated operations and going for it. That may be something that the social engineers want to turn people into nowadays. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has.
Let's back up. Let's back up.
Okay,
because
talked about a lot of things
in this say so many things in so many terms, and we have to be defining them and make sure anybody can follow. Soma, for example, like what is Soma? Right, and why is that such an interesting part of the book Brave New World? So Soma's the drug they take to forget their worries, right? Anybody that's asking questions about purpose and meaning, anybody that's dealing with existential crises, they would just take Soma to just basically vegetize themselves, or like basically put themselves into a walking, like into an awoken sleepwalk, right? Or some kind of like half coma. Like the Soma was about numbing their emotions, right? To cope with this strange world. And I see a parallel to how so many people medicate, how many people are on antidepressants these days, how normalized. I mean, even rap stars will like, I think there's a guy, is there a rapper called Little Xan, like for Little Xanax?
That's interesting. There are a lot of littles. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a Lil Xan, right? Which is like short for Xanax. I mean,
is it spelled Xan?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many of these rappers who rap about pharmaceuticals are paid by pharmaceutical companies. It makes sense to me because you used to have rappers rapping about liquor, and they're getting, endorsements from the liquor distributors. I mean, you have athletes who promote Gatorade or sportswear. So if you have rappers promoting pharmaceuticals, they're saying, "Oh, I'm so sad, I'm so depressed, take the pain away, give me a Xanax." I mean, it's kind of genius marketing, I suppose, but it's a Soma parallel. I mean, it's straight out of Brave New World.
I'm going to have to listen to some of these guys. There's Little Xan, and then there's also Little Peep, who I remember just because of the association of the word little before that. But they both seem to be kind of out of the same cloth. If you look at a photo of Little Peep and look at a photo of Little Xan, they've both got tattoos on their face. They've both got tattoos all over the place, really. And let's see, other than the tattoos, they seem to have this kind of, I don't really know what you would describe their style as. Like, they're wearing jerseys, they're kind of disheveled. They don't really seem to be all there. They seem to be in this in fact, I'm looking at a picture of Lil Xan, and I'm seeing ZZZ on his eye.
Have you seen 6ix9ine?
No.
Have you seen 6ix9ine?
Do I just type in 6ix9ine?
Type in the number 6, IX, the number 9, INE.
6.
His music is disturbing. And I can't explain it because I grew up listening to Eminem in the 3rd grade. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eminem's first album, but there's
where he dressed up as Robin, right?
In the music video. I think that was his second album. That was in the Real Slim Shady, Please Stand Up. The Real Slim Shady. That's when he dressed up as Robin.
Is this the Gucci Gang guy?
That's Lil Pump. Pump.
Okay, we're getting all of them down here. Okay, Lil Pump.
Hold on. I want you to look at 6ix9ine. Look at 6ix9ine because he's the one to talk about right now. Because I've listened to some of these mumble rappers, and some of them, they make you feel sick listening to them. And I want to say I'm not like I'm not a hater, right? Like, I understand everybody has their flavors, taste is subjective. I grew up listening to Eminem, When I was in third grade, I was 9 years old. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eminem's first album, but there was heinous stuff on there. There's talk about murder and overdosing and rape and fucking hate and bigotry, and it's surreal. It's a lot of parody and satire. Slim Shady is Eminem's alter ego, right? But he was sort of channeling his stuff into, you know, I guess, shock rap. However, I'm not sure if you're familiar with binaural beats or the therapeutic or emotional effects that music can have. But some music, to me, it just feels like I don't know how you find or develop this stuff. It to me, it just feels like the mindset is how, like, what's the worst feeling we can create? That's the only way I can describe it.
Well, I'm definitely going to listen to 6ix9ine and experience that.
Well, he
feeling.
recently had trouble with kids. He's getting in trouble with like sleeping with like little kids recently, and he's got a lot of backing. He's got some controversy with pedophilia.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out, looking at all these fellas, like if I line all of them up together, we got Lil Xan, we got Lil Peep, we got 6ix9ine, and we got Lil Pump. All of them seem to be kind of like manufactured boy bands, but manufactured to have the exact same kind of style when it comes to how their hair is, how their teeth are, the tattoos on the face. Like all of this stuff seems to be the same thing. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's just the style that's becoming popular right now. Or maybe these are the deals that they're making up front before they even start making this music, where everything is arranged ahead of time. You have to look like this. You have to sing like this.
No, I don't think it's
curatorial, but
no, and I don't. It's not that explicit. I think these people exist. I mean, I have friends with tattoos on their faces. You know what I mean? And no one's consulting them.
Where did they get that style from, though? Like, was it just a natural thing that ended up happening, or was it pushed by the media?
I mean, Lil Wayne has tattoos on his face. I mean, you can find successful. Mike Tyson has a tattoo on his face. Like, you can find very successful people that have tattoos on their faces.
It's not just about the tattoos, though. It's about the whole thing. Like, if you take the tattoos by themselves, sure, you could say Mike Tyson has it and other people have it. It's not just that. It's this candy, like rainbowish style along with the tattoos and this general disheveledness that I was mentioning earlier and this dazed look. For example, if you take a look at Mike Tyson throughout his boxing career, even though he ended up having that tattoo on his face, he was still dressing nice. You know, he still was on top of himself. But this seems to be a message of completely letting go and being fully in this days of intoxication from these pharmaceuticals. And again, it could all be completely natural, but it could also be pushed. Like, I could imagine this kind of idea being pushed to the masses so they would also start gyrating along with these folks. I don't know.
It's really hard to say. I use Occam's razor, and I there's some South Park there's a South Park episode that just came out in this last season with Eric Cartman. And Eric Cartman, he's trying to become a pop singer, and he's constantly singing about how depressed he is and how he's in so much pain and how he just wants to kill himself. And it's a total parody on this emo culture. And I think in the same episode, Kyle is campaigning against Canada. And he used to think fart jokes were funny, but now he sees fart jokes as part of the problem. Like, these Terrence and Phillip in the show are making these unfunny fart jokes and actually making people behave in sick ways, right? He's saying, so Kyle starts campaigning against Canada, saying that Canada is making people sick with their sick humor, and he wants it to stop. And then he calls the president, because he's friends with Mr. Garrison. I'm not sure if everyone watches South Park, but in South Park, they're teacher became the president, and he wears like a tan face and a wig, and he looks like Donald Trump, but it's Mr. Garrison in there. So Kyle calls the president, and then they nuke Canada, right? And it's just a bizarre episode, right? It's pure satire.
Yeah.
It's pure satire, but I mean, clearly they're inspired by the zeitgeist that we're in. I mean, you can find these musicians like Lil Peep. I listened to some of that music and it hurt my soul, right? It made me feel sick and cringe. It made my skin crawl. It made my skin crawl, right? Just the binaural beat aspect of it. I'm not even talking about the content of the lyrics. I'm just talking about if there was no lyrics involved, it's a skin crawling, deep sadness. And it's, to me, it's not a surprise that he's singing about and promoting abusing drugs and severe depression, and he dies. It's almost like, who are the people that are finding these people? Who are the people in the boardroom going, let's find the next big thing. Let's pump a bunch of money into someone and like get a team of people to cultivate this guy, and we're going to market him as a role model. That's what you're doing, right? Because it's like, this person achieved success. If you follow in this person's footsteps, you can end up like this person, right? So if you find all these mumble rappers, to me, it just seems like you're encouraging a bunch of them to do exactly that. And they're so young. These people are in their early 20s. So it's almost like it's odd. It's odd.
Well, there are two things that could be happening here. Number one, it could be just about the money, where they see certain things resonating with young people and they just try to latch on to that and keep that gravy train rolling. If young people who like this kind of music were into a different part of it, then they'd probably switch if we look at it coming from that side. But if we're coming from it being the anti-human side, where it's not just about the money, but it is about sucking the life out of people, then that's another way to look at it, where we do have people who maybe not consciously, but subconsciously like the fact that there is all this destruction going on. I think there are people in the world who have this tendency to, maybe it's self-hatred. Who knows what exactly it is? But I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who, for whichever reason, want to see the world burn, want to see society be downgraded a notch, and to just have chaos reign supreme. I'm not saying that that makes up the majority of the people, but I think you got to be a certain kind of ruthless in order to make it up any kind of hierarchy of this kind of business. Not everybody, but if you are one of those folks who is that kind of ruthless, hates humanity that much, then why wouldn't you have an agenda to destroy humanity's soul? But I'm not saying that that's what it is, but that could be the other explanation. What do you think?
I really don't think it's that nefarious. I think if you have people who are nihilistic and who identify as amoral, like if they believe wholeheartedly in moral relativism,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's a lot of people like have this postmodern framework. They don't even know it. And so a lot of people aren't even aware if they're energy vampires or if they're around energy vampires, right? And there can be a rebel appeal to some of these people, right? People that are just, the pseudo-intellectual, the intellectual yet idiot, the whole like life is pain and suffering and everything is bad and like life sucks and then you die. Like this kind of mentality, is very popular with a lot of existentialists and nihilists. And if you're a capitalist producer and you see that there's a market for these sad people, or for these, nihilistic or existentialist, or however you want to categorize them. I mean, I can see why you would just give the market what it demands. I think it's really like there's nothing illegal going on with promoting sad, depressing stuff, right? There's nothing wrong with sad, depressing art. I mean, personally, I'm wary of going too deep into stuff where the author killed themselves. Like, to me, that's always like a huge red flag.
Mhm.
Like, if I go and look at someone's bookshelf and all their authors on their shelf have committed suicide due to depression, to me, I'm like, and then they tell me they're on antidepressants. I mean, I'm not surprised, right? I'm just not surprised. It's like, how do you think your brain works? You're just reading a bunch of sad people who've killed themselves, and now you're on antidepressants. I mean, it's so
Well,
I don't know how
we're
to.
probably talking about a similar thing here, except that in the version that I'm proposing, the second possibility, I'm not just talking about the folks who make the music having this kind of mentality. They could be tragic souls who happen to go on the path of addiction and all the horrible stuff that follows that. What I'm talking about is actually the record company producers themselves, where whether it's about just the money or whether it's also the money plus
A political agenda?
I'm not saying that it's an agenda that they're conscious of. It could just be a general dickishness, a general hatred for humanity that's deep seated. Like every day when they
Schadenfreude. I hate Schadenfreude. Like, Schadenfreude, like when
yeah.
people feel happiness at other people's misfortune.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a love your enemy kind of guy. I'm a principle of charity, benefit of the doubt, like comedic oneness. Like, let's just get everybody together, right? I'm very optimistic for humanity's future. When I follow technological trends on the internet, trends with blockchain, like, I really feel like people can come together and solve a lot of our current problems and just find new problems to solve. There's always going to be problems, but like with Kanye West right now, he's more of a poet. He's not the best clinical speaker, right? He's not a really good legal speaker. But to me, I feel like he's trying to start bringing people together. He's trying to take away the stigma from talking to people across the perceived aisle. Do you know what I mean? He's trying to exfoliate the Schadenfreude away a little bit, right? Instead of identifying as a person and identifying other people as your enemy, like a lot of, like, Abraham Lincoln said, I've defeated my enemy when I've made my enemy my friend, right? And Jesus says, love your enemy. And these aren't trite, trivial points. It's obviously very hard to do, but I think there's something moral in that. If morality is about increasing the well-being of conscious creatures, and you want to maximize the well-being of your own consciousness and maximize the well-being of people's consciousness around you, like, you need to behave in ways that accomplish that, right? I mean, and this is, like, to me, it's common sense, and it's in people's best interest. Like, the happier you are, the more people will want to engage with you, and the happier other people are, the more productive and happy they'll be. And like as far as like positive influences in your own life, like, there's this demonization of individuals that I see, right? And like, if you look at cultures like the Greeks, were all about pride and ego and like being heroic and who's the best host, right? They would boast about, like, oh, I'm the better host. Oh, look how generous I am. Like, oh, I'm so much more generous than you are. And that was like Greek culture. It was about like admiring confidence and admiring pride and admiring honor. And now if you see people like that, like, people feel contempt. I mean, I see it a lot. It's not everywhere, but a lot of people, like, they're kind of like, well, why do you feel so good? Like, why are you so happy? Like why
Well,
are you so proud?
there's another level here where those people who say that, why do you feel so good? Why do you feel so happy? They almost have this pride about feeling that way, that they see themselves as superior because they feel like victims in comparison to whoever they look at as being the oppressor. And that's a very addicting feeling for some people to have. And it may be a similar feeling that, let's say, people in power may feel when it comes to all of humanity, that this humanity that we're a part of, with its rules and family and society and all of these things that we have, that this is all bullshit, and I'm going to screw it. I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to mess with it. I'm going to create these brave new world. What did you call them with the families that were all together?
Well,
Surrogates.
I like Brave New World. I think Brave New World can be reappropriated kind of rebelliously, but warily. Like, there's obviously things in Brave New World you want to avoid, just like 1984, there are things you want to avoid. But the technologies are coming. So the dystopias are a blueprint on what to avoid, but they also are clues to like the direction we're going in. So what are the positive ways of adapting into them?
It's pretty coincidental that 1984, which was written by an Englishman, has now, in a way, come to fruition in England itself, where we've got people who get arrested for posting a video of, as a joke, their dog doing a Sieg Heil.
What is
Well,
going on?
have you heard of that whole story with Count
I've heard
Dankula?
a little bit about that. Tell me about it.
Okay, so there's this dude who I think is like a classical liberal, Count Dankula. Like, I'm not really sure what his politics are, but he's, like, I don't think he's extreme one way or another when it comes to either extreme right or extreme left. Like, he's more of like a freedom-loving dude, I think.
Like
and
a clown or something, or
yeah, something like that, who just likes to
a troller.
rock the boat a little bit. So his rocking the boat was a joke that he did to his girlfriend, where he tried to take the cutest thing in the world, which was a pug, and make it do the most uncutest thing in the world, which was do a Heil Hitler, a Sieg Heil. And because he did that video, he almost ended up getting arrested, and he had a court procedure and all of this crazy stuff. And this was going on for years now. And now I think he has finally been
he was
not
sentenced,
guilty.
wasn't he? Oh, he wasn't sentenced?
No, I don't think he was sentenced, but he still has to wear a bracelet on his leg for I think a month or a couple of months.
He avoided jail.
Yeah, so all of this
It's crazy.
from a Monty Python-ish joke, like when you think of British comedy, you think of things that are really irreverent and things that are supposed to, spark the pearl clutching. But the whole point is that the pearl clutching doesn't get that string of pearls around the neck of the person who's doing the joke in the first place. And if this is the situation that's happening in England, not just with that, but also with people complaining about the situation with the migrants and other things in England, like, these people get arrested, these people get their computers confiscated. It is literally 1984, and the police have this stupid thing called I don't know if it's called bin that knife. That's the way they refer to it online. But they have these bins set up where you're supposed to throw your knives in it in order for there to be less knife crime. And the police do seizures of various apartments, and they show, like, on their Twitter, like, the different I don't know what you call it in England, like different little parts of England. They have their own constabulary, their own police force, and on their Twitter they would have the photo of, these are the weapons that we confiscated, and there's like butter knives there. There's just like all this kitchenware. And lately, I don't know if this is true. I hope this is a joke. I'm actually gonna look at it. I think one of their latest weapons that they confiscated was a potato peeler.
Do you hear this sound, by the way? I think this is a a
What?
large car or helicopter. There's constant helicopters in LA. I think they have 20 helicopters on
Mm,
patrol, and they hover, and they're loud. Like you're aware of them like constantly.
wow.
It's
Like Tupac Shakur referred to them as ghetto bird helicopters.
yeah, yeah.
So let's see. I'm trying to see over here. England potato peeler arrest or confiscation. Oh, here we go. 20. Okay. Man, United Kingdom, man arrested for having potato peeler in public.
What's going on?
The United Kingdom is making great strides to protect its people. First, they went ham on gun control, then came knife control. Now they're cracking down on veggie tools. Okay, so over here, the man ended up being behind bars after being found in a Dunfermline street with an offensive weapon, a potato peeler. Scott Walker, 39, of the James Bank Hostel, James Street, appeared from custody at Dunfer Sheriff Court. He admitted that on Saturday in Appin Crescent, a public place, he was in possession of an object which had a blade or was sharply pointed, namely a potato peeler. Defense solicitor Selena McKay said her client suffers from significant learning difficulties, which have been lifelong. Oh, man.
It's scary. I mean, it's scary. You watch this stuff happening, and to me, it seems. You know what? You're talking about 1984. Are you familiar in 1984 how they had those three supercontinents? They had like America. They had
Eurasia, East Asia.
They had the three supercontinents. So basically like Russia, China.
Airstrip 1. I think that's what England was called.
Right. Well, in the China supercontinent, their ideology was known as the death worship or the obliteration of the self, right? The obliteration of the self, which to me has to me is very familiar, sounds familiar to something that, I mean, we see in our day-to-day lives, like in popular culture, how people will say, oh, ego's the problem or ego's the enemy, or when people trash talk Ayn Rand or individualism or confidence and these principles, the culprit or the villain they identify as this egoism or egotism, right? Like they'll say you have delusions of grandeur, or you're a megalomaniac, or you're a narcissist, right? And the problem is you haven't obliterated yourself, right? But the thing is, the obliteration of self, which is cultural Marxism, right? Death worship, right? It's postmodernism, is confused with the Buddhist concept of the self-illusion. And I see this all the time. The self-illusion just means you are the story you tell yourself, right? Like it's not that the self doesn't exist, it's that it's not exactly what it seems to be, right? You are like the story you tell yourself depends on what you think others think, and what you think others think of you, right? And you're a collection of atoms, and we're all basically the same thing, right? With our own perspectives, but like that's what the Buddhism tries to teach when it talks about the self-illusion. The obliteration of self is something else. Like you can be aware of the self-illusion and you can enjoy the psychological benefits of Buddhism without death worship or without demonizing like a self-confidence or like egoism. Like I'll try to differentiate egoism and egotism. Like there's not a lot of words for self-love, right? And the ones that we have are stigmatized, like narcissism. Like if you love yourself, right, which maybe the Greeks would consider a positive quality, like here it's associated with sin. It's like one of the 7 deadly sins, pride. You know, it's distasteful. It's like you should be more humble. and you should be humble, but there's also something very important about loving yourself and being confident, and not just having shame for having an ego, right? You just need to, I don't know. That was my tangent.
It was a really good tangent, and I agree that people have this sense today that because, let's say, their forefathers were really expansionists and they were going out and conquering things and doing all the stuff, that now they have to kowtow and just not do anything, not achieve anything, and hopefully they're not going to hurt anything. But whenever anything great gets created, there's always going to be some rupture, some pain of something that came before. And it's an unfortunate fact of life, but that's the way a lot of these things are. We try to minimize the damage as much as possible today because we're aware of the mistakes that our forefathers made in crafting what's around us. But at the same time, if you just want to settle down in your little mouse hole and, just destroy yourself and not even participate in this thing, or if you just want to kowtow to whoever happens to be stronger and more dominant, it just seems like you're not utilizing the opportunity that you have in front of you to be a living, breathing human being. We got to learn from our mistakes. We got to learn from all the horrible things that have transpired in the past, but we can't just annihilate ourselves and give up. I mean, the Eastern view of this is that, and this is a bit of a generalization, but since the world is so shitty, in certain sects, let's say you would do austerities, you would put needles in yourself, you would not eat or drink for a long time, you would hang yourself upside down, whatever. Like, you would do all of these things in order to rid yourself of this illusion, this Maya that you're in. But the problem here, I personally think, is that if we are in this dimension right now, if we are in this experience as an experiencer, it would seem really stupid if there was, let's say, a oneness that we all came out of, for that oneness to have us go through these motions only to, not recognize the beautiful trees and flowers, but to start, like cutting our limbs off, or completely annihilating ourselves in various ways in
going
order to get out.
cyborg.
Really stupid.
Like going full cyborg.
Well, that could be another path. I just mean chopping your limbs off as far as austerity goes. I actually don't know if any Hindu ever chopped their limbs off for austerity's sake. I made that up. I'm not saying that that has been done. Maybe it has. I don't know. But you know what I mean. Like this need to look at the world as something ugly and something degenerate, where sure, sometimes we have all that ugliness and degeneracy and chaos in it, but we also have beauty, we also have art, we also have magnificence and grace and honor and epicness. We have all of this amazing stuff in this life, and to just take it and smash it up into little pieces, along with smashing up your inner self for the sake of, I don't know, like, there are two ways of looking about it. Either it's just pure wanting to see the world burn type of destruction in some people, and others, such as some people in Eastern religions, it's a matter of destroying the ego in order to get out of the cycle of birth and death. So those are two ways of going about it.
One moment. I hope this is not faux pas. I hear a sound from my refrigerator. I want to correct it, and I'm going to...
Go for it.
All right.
Go for it. I'm just going to be here with my crystal. This is lapis lazuli, and I can hold it like this, and if I breathe in, I start feeling some energy. I mean, not right now, since there's a camera looking on me, so I don't really know what I'm going to do with this thing. I could put on my head like here, and I become a unicorn. I become a lapis lazuli unicorn. Hey, Jules, how are you?
I'm back. Sorry about that, everybody.
While you were away, I turned into a lapis lazuli unicorn.
What kind of unicorn is that?
This is my crystal of power. This allows my third eye to project into reality. It allows me to merge the spiritual world with the human world, and I could shoot laser beams out of this if I concentrate like Professor X. Well, I should probably lower it down here because this is where the actual third eye is. I don't really know what's up here. Like some people draw stuff over here. I don't know. Personally, like I feel the vibration right over here. But anyway, that's a topic for a completely different scenario. I want to go back to the very beginning, since we were over here, and then we went all the way here and here and here and here and here and here. I want to go all the way to the beginning, which was the Wim Hof method, DMT, yoga class. And I just want to make sure that we did not lose anything in there before we keep going. So when we were talking about that Wim Hof method, I could actually bring this around full circle into what we were talking about before. When we were talking about the Wim Hof method, we were talking about DMT secretion. And DMT secretion is another way that you can connect to this higher world, I guess you could call it, whatever, like the psychedelic realm, the astral world, like whatever you want to call it. So you go into this realm and you start seeing various things. Some people start seeing, oh, that's adorable. Say something because I want to see your cat. It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. It'll be back. But anyway, to a lot of Eastern religions, that world, that DMT world, it's still not that important. It's still a world where, some people call it the desire plane. A world where your thoughts end up turning into life. So you could also say it's the dream world. And there's a limitation here too, where you're still participating in a cycle of want, in a cycle of, how do you call it? The desire. You keep going from one desire to the other, just like in that Twilight Zone example with that guy who was never satisfied, and he was actually in hell rather than in heaven when he kept playing the games and always winning and had all these hot girls around him. Same thing here. The desire world is also desire, and there's never going to be an end to that desire. So that's why a lot of these Eastern sects have the idea of death worship in the death of the ego. Not so much, like fuck this life. I mean, maybe that's a part of it too. But the other part of it is transcending all desire to go into an even higher level of something that we can't even explain. And on that, I would remain agnostic. Like, yes, you would have the people who totally hate this world and just want to get rid of both the world and themselves. But on the other hand, you would also have these people who want to transcend and maybe see what happens next. Maybe that's not the end either, but
I think, to me, I don't see people that, if I see someone that hates the world or that seems to, I tend to categorize it more as pessimism, as they've been hurt. You've heard hurt people hurt people. Like if you're feeling pain, it's common that you want to, like, subconsciously or otherwise, like, spread that pain. Misery enjoys company. I think a lot of people that they're like, fuck the world, I hate everything, I want to see it burn. I feel like they feel they've been wronged or betrayed or injustice, and now they're pessimistic that they can heal themselves, or that there's any reason for optimism or for a brighter tomorrow. And it's like an Ouroboros or something that eats its own tail, right? And it's just sort of they create their own hells, or they perpetuate them. Whether or not they create them, a lot of people underestimate how much they contribute to their own mental instability. It's hard because free will is a really interesting subject, right? I believe in free will. I'm a big believer in free will, but a lot of leading academics and physicists will tell you it's not real. They'll tell you don't have free will. It doesn't exist. Like Sam Harris. Well, I think it's like a language game. To me, it's a language game, and it's very similar to the self-illusion. When Sam Harris says that free will does not exist, he says that free will is an illusion, which means it's not that, to me, it's not that it doesn't exist. It means it's not what it seems. And what that means is, right, like I think free will is kind of like a muscle. I think some people have more of it than others, right? I think some people can wake up and they can set their mind into action and like do everything that they want to do. And then other people, they might be dealing with emotional hangovers, and they might be dealing with conflict or things pulling their attention in different directions, right? And that can wane on your free will, right? On your ability to will yourself to power. And I think that free will is actually on a spectrum where some people have very little, and some people develop it through discipline or through experience or just through random chance, like develop more of it. But if you study how viruses can affect your brain, like toxoplasmosis, which is the cat parasite, now it makes you act towards cats, or how certain diseases like a cold will make you sneeze more, to help spread the disease, or certain STDs make you want to have sex more, as in they literally change your behavior and the way your brain thinks.
Well, toxoplasmosis has been known to make men take more risks and women more promiscuous.
Fascinating.
So there we go. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that can change our free will, or not free will, but change our relationship to the idea of whether or not we have free will. Because in the end, I have no idea either whether we do or we don't. There's no way for me to actually prove it. But the point here is that when people spread that message in a less, how do I say it, a less subtle, a less elaborate way than you are spreading it, then what may end up happening is people can take that message the wrong way. They can take it in that, okay, then whatever I happen to be right now, like that's the state that I'm going to remain in. I don't know how many people will get affected by it that much, but it would definitely not be an empowering message. And people have the right to spread that message as well if they want to, but those could be the consequences.
Yeah.
Who would you say is spreading that kind of message?
Well, which one? Because there's variations on it. I mean, Daniel Dennett, I think, is one of the worst ones spreading the free will, the non-existent free will message. Sam Harris, to me, I feel like, could be my own conceit. I feel like if I was in a room with Sam Harris, I could get him to tweak his free will position, because I'm right there with him. But I feel like there's just a little tilt that it needs. I feel like he misses the opportunity to talk about how free will is like a muscle or a gradient, or how some people have more, some people have less. It's clearly true. For example, they did an experiment with a cockroach. They've attached a remote control to its brain, and you can drive it around, right? So clearly that cockroach has less free will than the cockroach without the machine directing its brain around.
Well, it depends.
Right? That's not even, to me, that's not even up to debate. If you're going to tell me that both the cockroach that I'm driving with a remote control has the same amount of free will as the cockroach without me controlling its brain with a remote control, you're lying. If you're going to tell me that if I hijack a cockroach's brain, right, and I'm using a machine to compel its motion with lasers in its brain, and I'm literally driving this thing around, and then you have a cockroach that'll just do its own fucking thing. You put sugar in front of it, it's going to get the sugar. If you chase it, it runs away. That cockroach has more free will than the cockroach that I'm manipulating. It's just true.
We may have to have another term then for what I thought of when
agency,
free will. Well,
agency.
Here's how I imagine it. So you have free will where let's say either somebody lobotomizes you and like they did to that cockroach and controls you in such a way that you move in a specific area. You could say that cockroach doesn't have any free will anymore. But my version of free will would be if this is predestined, meaning if there was a fate that awaited that specific cockroach where it had its brain lobotomized and had the mechanics added into it. Like, was that the track that cockroach would have ended up regardless of anything else, where everything that we're experiencing right now is a play? Where in that sense, sure, you could say some people have less free will than others, but everything that is happening right now is supposed to happen exactly as it's supposed to happen. That would be another way of looking at free will, which I don't know, like it may.
But that's the spectrum. So like free will goes hand in hand with beliefs in determinism. Like there's people that believe in free will and no determinism, free will and yes determinism, no free will, determinism, no free will, no determinism. I don't believe in determinism. And I believe in limited free will. I believe in the free will illusion, as in it exists. It's not exactly what it seems, right? You have it, right? And it has limits, right? Like you can't control hunger, right? Like your body, you need sleep, right? That's out of your free will control, right? Like you need to eat, and like there are things that come from your primordial code, right? That come from your DNA that determine how you operate, and that's outside of your free will. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, choices. I'm talking about choices people make about how to spend their time or how to build habits or how to like recover or like who to surround themselves with or what books to read. And, free will, sure, it's limited. There's all sorts of things that influence us, but some people have more, some people have less. And obviously, if you lobotomize someone or hijack their brain with a machine and you're controlling it remotely, like it's questionable if a person like that or an animal like that would have free will at all.
Unless it was the, unless it was the design in advance to have that person be in that particular state at that particular time, which I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't believe in determinism. I think it's incompatible with chaos theory, which you have my copy of James Black's.
I have it right here, just so you see that I did not lose it. I have it right over here on the shelf. Here it is. Here's Chaos.
It's my baby. That book is a lot about the Mandelbrot set, which is also known as the thumbprint of God. Right? Mm-hmm. So I'm an atheist. I tell people I'm an atheist who believes in God. Like what? Or just how does that even what? You know what I mean? So like I don't have an Abrahamic faith. Like I don't believe in a guy upstairs. I believe in God as a metaphor for the universe and for like the manifestation of all things. Like I'm God, you're God, everything is God, right? And it's like in many ways, like if somehow we find out a way to reintroduce God into the vocabulary for atheists, it would be an immediate, powerful way to look at how complex systems work, how complex systems thrive, what is their inherent nature, and like what are the laws of dynamic physics. And that's chaos theory, right? And chaos theory, as I understand it, is completely incompatible with determinism, right? And it's because of how things emerge from nothing and how chaos winds the clock. It's not like if you had perfect information, even if you had perfect information, the laws of chaos theory like would make future events unpredictable. So like the old way of thinking about determinism was, in theory, if you had perfect information and you knew all the variables, like how the wind is moving and the molecules and like the atoms, and you could like type it into a supercomputer and look at where things are going, right? That's the premise of the Foundation trilogy, like Isaac Asimov's book about like predicting the future with super tech.
I read that. It's a good book.
Yeah, did you read all three?
I did.
I have them on my shelf right here. I have yet to read them, and I have the audiobooks to go along with them. I'm very excited.
So in that version of events, that would be more along the lines of a history that can be predicted by people, that has a general mechanistic way that it works, that this happens from this and this happens from that. And I also am not a big believer in things working out that way, even though, again, I have nothing to prove otherwise. But I think I can meet you in the middle with what you're saying, where the way that I imagine this whole thing to work out is there are cycles within cycles within cycles within cycles, and cycles have influence on the inner cycles as well. So, for example, in the cycle of our day-to-day life, whatever we put in our mouths and into our stomachs, whatever consists of our diet, ends up changing various processes in our body, ends up changing, whether we're skinny or fat or, whatever, whether we're healthy or not healthy. We have a certain influence on the cells in our body, on the way that it's made up. I generally believe that this influence is not just limited to us, and everything else has no influence on us, as far as, yes, the moon has an influence, for example, on menstrual cycles. And
does it?
Yeah, it does.
I don't know.
And as far as astrology goes, I have no way of proving anything of that nature. But the general idea there is that the alignments of planets and stars and things like that also affect the personality of the person who is.
I'm a big skeptic of that. My girlfriend loves astrology. She's like memorized birthdays, and it's like her organizational map of the world. Like starts with like, what's your birthday? And that's how she like organizes things in her head. Some people love astrology.
Well, look at it this way. Our cells have a lack of leeway as far as they have to do certain things all the time. The cells that make up our heart are going to keep making up our heart. Obviously the cells are going to change over time, but the general configuration is going to remain the same. The blood is going to be moving in predictable ways. Sometimes it's going to move faster, sometimes it's going to move slower, but generally it's going to keep doing what it's doing. At the same time, all these things have a certain influence that comes from us, from the way that we end up treating our body. So it goes from us all the way down. There's also another way that you can look at it, where whatever's happening in the body affects us in turn. The probiotics that we have inside of us, the gut flora, end up affecting our emotions. So it's a two-way relationship, and that's the way, I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but that's the way I kind of see the relationship between what people consider to be higher energies or deities or gods or whatever you want to call it. Whatever things may be up there that are influencing us, I think it's a two-way street, where we are creating thought forms, and those thought forms end up becoming these deities over time, kind of like they have a Kek, for instance, on 4chan, where they have this Egyptian god who was created, who was powered by these numbers, where every post that you make on 4chan has a hex number thing after it, which denotes this post is number 7,500,000, and I missed the 100,000, but you get the idea. So the ending numbers, if they come up as they call it, dubs or trips or quads, where you know what that means, like dubs, it's like two of the same numbers.
Yes.
Trips is three, and so on and so forth. So when that happens, the post that is made above or under those numbers.
I want to orient our audience, because we're quickly getting into like unfriendly normie territory, right? We're starting to talk. I feel like we should be ready to pull out our tinfoil hat soon. We're talking about astrology and everything. Here, I'm an atheist, right? Technically agnostic, right? But I also identify as a pagan. And this was a new thing for me, because I was always such a hardcore science guy, right? I just wanted to I wanted no counterfactual claims. I wanted to abide by philosophical naturalism, right? No supernatural stuff, right? To me, if it exists, it's natural. Something that is supernatural, right? Something existing outside of nature can exist, because if it exists, it's in nature, right? And you have to like create a framework where nature explains its existence.
Mm-hmm.
To me, right, like astrology and tarot cards, I see them as great tools for narrative self-intuition, right? As in, I mean, one of my favorite philosophers, Nassim Taleb, he makes a joke saying, you know, modern economists make astrologers look like phenomenal, right? If so, as far as like predictive quality goes, like as far as like being able to like describe reality, right? Like most economists fall short of astrology, and I think he's very critical, or thinks, you know, astrology is bunk. So it says a lot about what he thinks about most economists. But I think there's definite value and lessons in these things, just like Jordan Peterson talks about in mythology, or like that there are inherent lessons and truths to be learned from it. But I think there's too many glaring contradictions I have found when examining astrology for, you know, little things like if you find identical twins and they have completely different personalities. Like, to me, whatever the popular explanation is for astrology, like that, to me, like you have to pay the closest attention to the information that kind of contradicts it, to which is to me why astrology, it's a soft science. Like, it's not even a science. I mean, and neither is most psychology stuff. So it's funny because I used to be such a hater of astrology, but I've started to see it help so many people in different ways that I started thinking about it in an outside the box way. And I think that there's a lot of benefits to using it as an organizational framework, even if it is based on a lot of bunk.
Well, here's my retort to that, and take it as you will. I think the reason why when you have twins and one of them has a completely different personality that does not match up to any of the star or planet alignments, and you would think, why would that be? Well, think about it this way. If it was the other way around, if they can show that every single twin happens to have the exact same personality, that would make the belief in astrology very substantial. That would make the idea of these influences so much more visible. Kind of like, for example, if we had an actual alien visitation that was captured, you know, in crystal clear vision, or if we had ghosts that we were able to communicate with on a regular basis. What would all these things do? All these things would ruin the illusion. All these things would make us not take this life so seriously, because if we can accept that ghosts are among us, if we accept that there are all these fantastical things, then I don't think we value life as much. We would just, you know, we would probably kill ourselves for fun because we know that on the other side, you know, it's just going to continue. So that may be one way of looking at it, that having twins with different personalities is a fail-safe so that people don't go full don't go full woo at the time when our consciousness is supposed to be knowing the world. By knowing the world, what I mean is, like with Adam and Eve, for example, we have the idea that Adam knew Eve after he ate the apple. They knew each other. In the Bible, also, when they use the word "I knew somebody," it's also an expression for sex. So when somebody had sex with somebody, they would say in the Bible, you know, like Joshua knew Marigold, or I don't know if there's a Marigold in the Bible. I'm just making that up. But anyway, the point is that knowing is something that, at least according to the various weird texts that I've read, is the expansion of consciousness from a dream state to a state of awakening, to the external world, where instead of being in this sleep of being taken care of by whatever higher influence there is. So, for example, in people who are maybe less civilized, like tribal societies, they would take magic and all this stuff far more literally than we would here, because in their world, they're sort of in this sleep-like state. They would experience much more of a dream state, as far as I'm able to understand, when they're going about their daily lives. And like I was reading recently in a book by Carl Jung, some of these tribal people, when they would see a fellow tribal whatever compatriot getting eaten by a crocodile, they would take that as a specific sign that something may have been wrong. Maybe they didn't do this ritual the right way. Maybe it was a sorcerer who did it. They would never attribute any event to randomness. They would always attribute it to a higher influence. But when you start to know the world around you, you start to create order. You get out of the dream state and you go into the state where you're able to manipulate the matter around you in such a way that you end up creating buildings and temples and cathedrals and banks and trains and airplanes and all this
culture,
kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. This is us knowing the world, much like you could say Adam knew Eve when the fruit was eaten. And what was that fruit? That was the tree of knowledge. So we are currently in the state of knowing, and I think we're in the state of getting this kind of experience. But I don't really think that this is the end either. Like, I don't even know what we started off with talking here.
Yeah, how do we wrap this up? How long should we keep this going? Because
how long has it been kept going?
I couldn't find a time counter. I could do this forever. But I want people to be able to listen to this. We could like stop it and then start a brand new one and just save it.
Yes. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to press the stop broadcast button right now and call it a day. But I think this was a wonderful experience. Jules, thank you so much.
Well, wait, before that,
okay.
Let's just make sure we don't end too abruptly, right?
Yeah, you don't want
that was like such a hard stop. We talked about so many things. I'm really looking forward to doing more of these podcasts, and I guess that is the time. I guess that is the time to sign off, right?
I'll leave.
But let's keep talking.
The end of the yoga story. You want to hear the end of the yoga story?
I do want to hear the end of the yoga story.
Okay, so after I did that hot yoga class, I went into the locker room, and in the locker room, I was really, really dazed. I didn't really know what was going on. I ended up having to put my stuff in the locker and take it out of the locker because I wasn't sure if my cell phone was in the right place. Anyway, when I finally got to the steam room, it was really steamy. But in that steam, I was able to see all the gentlemen sitting in there enjoying themselves quite a bit.
Whoa!
Yes.
In what way?
I think you could figure out the rest.
Sounds like an opportunity for a new business. I just saw these businesses they're opening up these sex clubs in New York, and they just opened up an erotic theme park. They just opened up it's like imagine Six Flags, but everybody's naked and there's like eroticism, and it's like it's totally crazy. I love it. I love the world we're moving into. We got to strip away these stupid taboos and like just have like a healthier, stronger, like more fun, full of life, like society and culture. And I think
it wasn't like, honestly, it didn't really strike me as being bad, but I don't know, like sanitary wise and all that kind of thing. Like we probably got to get some drones in there or something to quickly clean up these places, or at least I don't know. Like whenever I go into that room, I always have a blindfold on. Not because of that, because I do meditation there.
Right. So it's so funny. Just imagine you like meditating, and, like people like engaging in like fornication like around you and like all sorts of stuff. And it's just
no, you don't need to imagine. That's actually literally happened when I was in another bathhouse. I went into a room and there were folks in there who looked like kind of like a muscle-bound Freddie Mercury. You know, they had like the biker mustache and all that.
Well, I've seen all these articles on Vice and other places where it's like all these articles about straight guys having sex with other guys and stuff. And it's like, I'm like trying to figure out, it's like,
I don't know. I think that all that bromance stuff is just another way to confuse people today. Like there's a lot of chaos and confusion. And at the end of the day, like I don't really give a shit who you have sex with, but it feels like there are always going to be forces out there, and that goes back to whether it's all about money or whether it's all about wanting to destroy order for the sake of chaos, because we talked about those principles too, order and chaos, and out of order comes chaos, and out of chaos comes order. So whether it's also a matter of destroying whatever semblance of order there is, not for the sake of any grand goal, except for chaos itself. That could also be a part of it. So my whole thing here is I want to keep the door open for people to do whatever they want to do, but at the same time, I'd want to encourage families as a family unit to have a more heightened sense of morality as far as encouraging, having a family and all that kind of stuff.
Family is so important. And I think that people are very confused by the fairy tale narrative and incongruities they find within their own human nature, and just with what's being pumped out in popular culture, whether it's celebrity gossip or like narrative filmmaking and television, right? Like you look, everybody's cheating and everybody's breaking up and everybody's like pessimistic on love. And I think honestly, if people had a more, I've said this before, clinical understanding of how love works, right? Like science doesn't take the magic out of reality, it enhances the magic of reality. Like if you don't understand how these systems work, right? Like you can, like a lot of people I think find themselves in this confusion because what they live doesn't add up. Like they're told that things are supposed to be a certain way, but people can tell something about the cultural storyline isn't quite there. And so, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. Most people that know me know I think monogamy is like a cultural construct, right? We're genetically non-monogamous and culturally monogamous. I also happen to think people are genetically bisexual and that society codifies our behavior. And there's a spectrum, like some people might be more prone or less prone. But ultimately, if you just look at other societies, right, and how people behave in other cultures and history, like to me, it seems like the determining factor in how people behave is grossly due to culture, right? And we have genetic impulses, right? Like we have our limited free will, right? Like we get hungry, we crave sex, we crave sleep, but I think that you can't deny our evolutionary psychology. And I think the less shame people have, like the more shame exorcisms we do on people so that they can just like understand themselves, like we can have a much happier and healthier society.
I would partly agree, but it's a complicated issue as well, because we're not just, to be completely honest here, we're not dealing with people who are always going to be the smartest bananas in the bunch. There are going to be people out there who would take a certain idea and run with it to such an extent that all of society breaks down and the family unit breaks down, all that stuff breaks down, because in order to educate people to that extent, you're going to need to do a lot of work there. You're going to need to educate everybody en masse, and a lot of that ends up getting rid of a lot of free will that people have to live a certain way too. So it's a very complicated process in order to get people to think so subtly about this kind of stuff. So if we're talking about the default of how do I, as an average person going through life, engage myself within society, what do I do? All right, I'm going to have kids, I'm going to have a wife, I'm going to have this home with a white picket fence, whatever. It's not the best, but as a default, it's not bad. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I love listening to Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux, and I know these guys are very traditionalist, and they're all about the nuclear family and those kinds of things. Jordan Peterson says you shouldn't masturbate and things like that. And so I obviously disagree with them on a lot of these things, but I think we're at a transitional period where technology is moving exponentially and so is culture in tandem, moving exponentially. And I think that we don't have any role models on how to engage in alternative family structures, because I believe in soulmates, in commitment, and I think, you know, I'm a big believer in unconditional love as far as a philosophy or a religion or a faith goes. And I think that when it comes down to it, that's why I've recently found, listening to Jordan Peterson, who's an analytic Christian philosopher, or like a mythology philosopher, someone that is able to express through heuristics the benefits of some of these traditional values. But still, I don't allow that to like put blinders on me to like understanding evolution. And I think that there are pagan alternatives, right, where you can have very, very strong family units, right, that aren't so fragilely rigid, which is what I think is the problem now. Because I think, just like you used to have, God used to be the ultimate judge, right? People used to say, like, you better behave because God is watching you. And now, like, God is dead, right? But these machines we have are everywhere, and they kill secrets, right? And it's becoming harder and harder and harder to keep a secret, right? If you're going to philander and cheat on your wife, you know, someone's going to take a picture of you and put it on Twitter. Do you know what I mean? So are people going to stop doing the things they used to feel the need to do in secret? Or does society shift, and does the culture start to accommodate these things that people used to feel the need to do in secret? And I think it's going to be something like that, where people are going to be forced to confront their human nature, and they're going to see, you know, like, oh, either everyone's like an evil degenerate with no moral class, or like people are being forced into a Procrustean bed, like King Procrustes. He would say, okay, I have a one bed, one size fits all. If you're too short for the bed, we're going to stretch you on the rack. If you're too tall, we're going to chop you off beneath the knees. Do you know what I mean? And now everybody's fucking in pain, right? And in this bed that they don't even fit in, right? Because they're being forced to fit into something. So I think that a lot of like modern systems are Procrustean beds. You're tailoring people to fit into suits, as opposed to tailoring suits to fit people, right? And I think that's something that needs to change.
The solution may be, and it's a very hackneyed phrase nowadays, but the solution may be somewhere in the middle between what you just described right now, the Procrustean bed, where things are constrained to fit a certain mold. But on the other side of it over here, you have things being so unconstrained as far as how you conduct yourself in society, that I think this ends up resulting in a lot of loneliness too.
Yes. No. And you know, I'm like a fan of anarcho-capitalism or anarchy, right?
The
Capital A, lowercase a, I don't know. But to me, it's because I understand how order emerges from chaos. As like an anarchist quickly learns like what helps them create order and what doesn't help them create order. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like being the Joker or Bane and just like, you know, like reveling in entropy. It's actually about like understanding that systems are chaotic, and it's like up to the individual to manifest order within these chaotic and complex systems, right? So it's to me, anarchy is really about individualism, and it's really about like good practice that helps you create order in environments that could otherwise be chaotic, right? Because we don't live in anarchy as far as like a government goes, but if shit hits the fan, right, it's up to people to create their own order, right? And people know that inherently. And so I feel like anarchy, just like God, anarchy, chaos these are words that need some clarification or rehabilitation in an atheist framework or in an organizational framework about how things work and how should we design our systems to help everyone thrive.
Well, in talking about that balance between order and chaos and what would happen if shit does hit the fan and we're going to have to forage and hunt and do all that stuff that we used to do. This brings me to, and I know we keep going on this thing, but it's really fun talking to you about all this. So I want to bring this to the story I read today about the Boy Scouts, where they're taking the word boy out of Boy Scouts and they're including girls into the Boy Scouts. And I am not a big fan of this because it's like there has to be some areas where certain things are boy things. So like having a no girls allowed clubhouse. If that's what boys want to do, then by golly, let them do that. You know, like why not have certain things that are for boys and certain things that are for girls? If you want to have something else where it's both boys and girls, great, absolutely. But don't limit the boy part either. Like all of those initiation rituals and all the stuff that like the hazing, as they call it in college, even though certain parts of those were pretty bad, like no matter how much these rituals try to get suppressed and all this stuff when it comes to, you know, like Fight Club type stuff, whenever they get suppressed, it never ends up getting rid of the actual need to have that validation, to have that sense of camaraderie, or however you say that word, amongst your fellow male peers. Like that is an inherent part of our biology, I think.
Camaraderie?
Camaraderie. I'm not sure how to say that. Yeah, camaraderie. That's it. Camaraderie. Yes. So like that, I think, is a very big part of our biology, and it's innate. It's something that we have, and I don't think it's something that we should just discard for our vision of everybody being completely equal. Like that goes back. It's very funny because a lot of atheists have this communist ideal of everything being completely the same and being equal, even though technically speaking, that is the idea of merging with the infinite and everything becoming one, which a lot of religious people also have. The problem is that both of those orders, if they do this by force, end up creating a lot more problems. And that's where I agree with you, where people have to have the freedom in order to pursue whatever they want and, be able to, if you want to put a dress on, whatever. But at the same time, not have certain things be forced upon people, especially little kids, for the sake of them not being, getting rid of their toxic masculinity and all that bullshit. Like that is social engineer bullshit, and that has got to stop.
Well, like, next time we do this, we should talk about social engineering and maybe some more stuff that's going on in politics. I felt like this was like a spiritual pop culture current events convo, and with a little bit of lifestyle sprinkled in there. But there's so much more I want to talk about with you. And I feel like now we might be at a good spot to wrap this up, and because now we have a good starting point for the next one. Because again, social engineering and what's going on with the world is something that's really interesting to me, and I know it's interesting to you. And so this is awesome. This was really great.
It was a pleasure, Jules. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to see this.
Same here. Take care.
All right. Peace, brother.
Bye.